Good morning. I hope you're doing well today. Come on with us to Acts 27. Let's talk about Paul and the shipwreck. In Acts chapter 27, Paul has appealed to Caesar. He's in Roman custody. They board a ship sailing for Rome, and a storm starts kicking up. It's a longer account. It's the whole chapter. We don't have time to read it all, but let's pull a few things out. In verse 10, as the storm begins, it says, "Men, I perceive," Paul tells the men, he says, "I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also our lives." How many disasters would be avoided in our lives if we would just learn to listen to those who are trying to help us? We could be talking about preachers, elders, parents, children. We could be talking about anybody, and of course the Lord Himself. We've got to learn to listen when people are trying to help us. We pray, "Lead us not into temptation," but at the same time we get headstrong and we don't listen when people are trying to guide us away from disaster. And lo and behold, what happens? We face ruin a lot of times. What we need to do is we need to learn to listen. Verse 19 now, as the storm continues on, it says, "On the third day, we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands." They had to lighten their load, and we have to do the same thing. The Gospels talk about the cares of this world choking the Word. Those things aren't necessarily sinful, but if they're burdening us down, we've got to lay them aside is what we've got to do. They started throwing food and everything else. They started throwing it overboard because the ship was actually starting to come apart underneath. It talks about they had to run cables. It speaks about in verse 17 to undergird the ship. The trouble is below the surface very often. Now the storm continues on. Verse 27, it says, "And the 14th night had come. They were driven up and down in the Adriatic Sea." Some storms just have to be endured, even for Christians. Some of them, they just have to be endured. We pray, "Let this cup pass from me," but sometimes you have to go through the storm. You have to endure. The Lord allows us to go through those things sometimes because He knows that we can endure them and we'll come out. You might think about James 1, "Let patience," as it talks about, "count it all joy when you fall into various trials," because the Lord, they have a purpose. We'll put it like that. Now verse 4, it talks about, towards the end of it, says, they all escaped to safety on land. Let's make this point. When you find the way of escape, you better take it. And you better come out of the storm, and you better not go back out into it. Hope you enjoyed this study today. God bless you. Be a blessing to others. Hope to see you tomorrow.